from different corners of the globe. And without wasting any time, with the permission from our respected session chair, can you start, sir, for the session computational intelligence and biodata, big data? Sorry. Uh,
Yeah, let's get started. I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble getting my video online. I was playing around with two monitors, so that was always a bad idea to try to do it just before this. So I'll try to get it back online later, but I don't want to delay things. So I apologize for the lack of video at my end.
no issues, sir. It's not an issue.
Let's get started. So welcome everyone. And it's really my pleasure and honor to serve as the session chair for this session. And without further ado, let us get started with our first presentation. The title of the paper is Clustering and Classification Models for Students' Grid Detection in E-Learning. And I believe, if I remember correctly from the text earlier, we have the presenter here, who is Karen. So Karen, please go ahead and start sharing your screen and start the presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay, sir. So allow me to share my screen. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. So can I start now?
Yes, and I forgot to mention that please, everyone should keep their presentation to 12 minutes, more or less. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so good day, everyone. So on behalf of my research partners, I'm going to present our research entitled Clustering and Classification Models for Students' Grid Detection in E-Learning. So for the introduction, so the significance of intellectual capacity is well documented in academic and professional domains, but we understood very little about other equally critical characteristics that foresee success. Studies have proven learners' cognitive ability is insufficient. They must surmount hurdles, be dedicated and disciplined, and maintain high motivation to achieve goals while remaining resilient. Duckworth presented grit as an intangible individual quality of perseverance, willingness, and determination to accomplish long-term aspiration despite setbacks. Studies have shown that gritty people continually push to give their best without regard for constraints. However, one needs to adopt a growth mindset to build grit by recognizing that intelligence and talent can be fostered through hard work as an opportunity to learn and progress. Literature reveals high grit levels consistently predicted individual success than intelligence alone. Studies have also demonstrated that grit predicted graduation rates, higher GPAs, retention rates in military cadets, and long-term employment among the few. For quantifying the characteristic, a 12-item grit scale, which is designed by Duckworth and others, assesses the attribute with a scoring system. However, published articles laid out the problems with questionnaires such as prone to inaccuracies due to frame of reference bias and social desirability. While considerable efforts employed grit as tenet of success, no existing studies glance into the prospect of identification of the trait through learners' behavior in e-learning using computational methods. With this being said, grit analysis in e-learning environment is still in its inception. So we conducted, arguably the first, an experiment to investigate possibility of detecting grit in remote learning. This study's relevance cannot be overstated as e-learning, pandemic or not, has become increasingly prevalent in higher education institutions worldwide. Our research contribution is to generate machine learning models for identifying grit in e-learning to advance the discourse. This initiative will aid educators at all levels by utilizing innovative data analytics to ascertain student characteristics and deliver interventions to help learners build non-cognitive skills. So for the methodology, we utilized 562,174 recorded interaction logs of a Moodle course spanning for 4 years, starting from 2014 to 2017. We purposefully selected 500 most active accounts based on equal standard distribution. Aside from the e-learning log data, we also collected their grade scale questionnaire results, final course grades, and current job levels, which are measures for their professional achievement for correlational purposes. So for the related learner attributes in e-learning, so based on the literature, we came up with the following related learner attributes, namely, the first one is self-motivation, which was derived through the number of instances a learner attempted to reach a passing score on self-assessment exam. The next one is self-disciplined, which was determined by the number of hours spent in the course outside the authorized class schedule. The third attribute is diligence, which was quantified by the number of on-time submissions on mandatory tasks. The fourth one is perseverance, which was measured by the number of attempts to finish and provide correct solutions to complex programming simulations. And the last one is sustained interest, which served as a measurement of consistency of logins to the course. So for the feature mapping for clustering, Table 1 depicts the mapping of students' extracted data from the LMS database according to the characterizations of grid detailed in the previous section. And for the access consistency calculation, we use dynamic time warping to quantify the attribute by comparing two temporal sequences. It is designed to generate to input time series to determine resemblance of disparities. Typically, the resemblance or disparities is determined by transforming the data into vectors and computing the Euclidean distance between vector space points as described in this equation, where x and y are two time series data. X sub I and Y sub I are vector points for comparison. So if two sequences are equal, their distance is 0, while a distance value of more than 1.20 indicates the similarity based on simulated t-test p-value amounting to 0.05. So for the access consistency calculation, we set a consistency baseline based on average login hours of all learners for 18 weeks or equivalent to 1 semester. An algorithm is designed to prevent penalizing students for exceeding the maximum weekly threshold. So for the grid level detection through clustering, we use density-based spatial clustering, which is an efficient tool in handling noises and catches outliers. Data were also normalized by min-max scaling. And we also derived 5 highly separable clusters for grid level identification based on silhouette scores. And these are the scores for each cluster. For cluster 1, 0.8, for cluster 2.7, for cluster 3.7, for cluster 4.6, and for cluster 5.6. And for the grid level detection through clustering, final grid levels are identified through majority of votes, which is similar to the ensemble modeling's hard voting mechanisms for each 5 clusters. So this adds robustness to estimation. So for the grid level prediction through classification, so we partition the data set, 70-30 training and testing split. And we also implemented tenfold cross-validation to evaluate the accuracies of various supervised learning models, including J48, logistic regression, artificial neural network, k-nearest neighbor, random forest, support vector machines, and naive weights. And for the dimensionality reduction, we utilize principal component analysis. And as you can see in this figure, 2 components contain a total of 90.76 variations. And as you can see in this table, perseverance, sustained interest, self-motivation, and self-disciplines are the primary contributors to each component. And since diligence ranked the least, it was decided to be removed. And for the model evaluations and interpretation, so we estimated machine learning algorithms, predictive quality, reliability using established metrics such as F1 score, precision, sensitivity, accuracy, confusion matrix, receiver operating characteristics, and area under the curve. And for the interpretation, we utilize permutations, feature importance, a priori algorithm, and correlational analysis. So for the results of this research, So in contrast to the learned parameters of a model, hyperparameters are user specified. While providing suitable values improves the performance of machine learning, it is one of the most time consuming and underutilized tasks in knowledge discovery. And for the evaluation score, Table 5 demonstrates the random forest performed better with 92.09% due to ensemble mechanism, while logistic regression underperforms with 81.16%. And for the confusion matrix, receiver operating characteristics and area under the curve, it has been shown that there is a prediction of that the prediction of greedy individual is more accurate with 93.75% than non-greedy ones with 88.70%. Furthermore, figure number 4 illustrates an area under the curve score rating of 0.979, which means non-random substantial prediction. For the model interpretation via feature for importance and perseverance was the best predictor, followed by sustained interest, self-motivation, and self-discipline. We also use association rule mining to detect the discovery for the discovering interest relationship and frequent associations and causality. It also shows that grit levels are positively linked to perseverance, and the second indicator was sustained interest. Furthermore, students with low grit shows combinations of low self-motivation and sustained interest, low perseverance, and low self-motivation. For the consistency of clustering and classification, we also observed the higher score for the high grit class with 97.63%, while 97.61% for the low grit groups. Both algorithms categorization are not far off, and the calculated consistencies are highly acceptable. Okay, so we also found higher consistency scores for random forest with 94.07% and 93.49%. Scan yields 91.85% and 90.55%. All are acceptable consistency ratings. And for the correlation of grit attributes to course ratings, we utilize Spearman rank, which depicts that there is a generally weak correlation between course rating and self-motivation and self-discipline. However, perseverance and sustained interest are not significant at 0.05 levels. In stark contrast, professional achievement dictates a very strong correlation with perseverance and sustained interest. Self-motivation and self-discipline are not significant at 0.05 levels. And furthermore, a tracer study reported that 273 of 500 graduates with high-level combinations of perseverance and sustained interest based on their e-learning behaviors have high-paying profession above the country's average wages. And for the discussions, this research determines the capability of machine learning to identify grit in an e-learning environment using multiple modeling techniques. The results clearly illustrated that with intuitive data mining strategies such as dynamic time warping, clustering, feature scaling, dimensionality reduction, hyperparameter optimization, and classification improves prediction accuracy. The study also noted that it is best to complement rather than compare the strengths of unsupervised and supervised learning. Analytics rank perseverance and sustained interest as the two most salient components of grit in agreement with various studies. Generalization capabilities of our model yields an acceptable consistency score of 32.67% against annual questionnaire method. This work disclosed weak correlation between course rating and grit attributes, confirming several articles, whereas professional achievement shows strong positive correlations. While grit is strongly related to long-term goals, results reveal that it might not be the case for short-term academic achievements such as course grades. The lack of correlation between the two variables is attributed to age-related changes in an individual's grit level similar to the findings of Duckworth. It suggests that grit may lack discriminant validity in younger people because they still discover their interests and continually change. Thus, this research attested that developmental changes in maturational variables could be considered significant in explaining why grit attributes are linked with long-term than short-term goals. Our studies limited only to discernible variables observed in the confines of e-learning and did not include other essential characteristics such as demographics. So for the conclusions, not all accomplishments are purely the consequence of intellectual aptitude and talent. Intangibles such as perseverance and resilience are critical factors deciding one's success. Learning and behavioral processes can now be studied in detail using students' digital traces, which previously were too expensive to obtain via conventional sources. We discovered the potential of determining learners' grit through multiple stages of machine learning approaches and extensive modeling. More importantly, we shed light on the relationship of grit with academic and professional achievement. This empirical evidence demonstrates that the critical nature of cultivating non-cognitive abilities such as grit among students, which has the predictive ability for long-term achievements. Our investigation has profound implications for various educational institutions that holistic development of students, may it be cognitive and non-cognitive skills, must be given full attention. That will be all. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I just request to all the participants, all the presenters especially, please be restrict to your presentation within 12 minutes. Otherwise, it will be very late for the subsequent events, right? Thank you. Professor Sudarshan, please. You're not audible. You're not audible. Uh, no, sir.
Oh, sir.
Yes, yes. Hello. Sir, we can't hear you. Could you please check your audio? No, no, sir. But last time you have just logged out and again logged in, and that somehow worked. You might have, you can do that procedure also, no problem. Okay, in the meantime, if the audience, if you have any question, you can please try. Do you have any question? The floor. Okay, nothing. Okay, thank you. And as Professor Sudarshan is telling to the next speaker, we can invite. So I do invite the next speaker. Let me call the ID. Yeah, 1570806571 to offload